All right, this unit is on circles, and it's similar to another unit we did in that part of it's in one chapter and part of it's in another. So we're going to do lesson 7-6, which gives a lot of background information on circles, a lot of things you already know, and then also talk about arc measure and the difference between arc measure and arc length. And then we're going to move to chapter 11 to cover most of the other topics on circles, and that whole chapter is on circles. And then after that, we'll come back and start talking about area and circumference and those kind of things, which will be in lesson 7-7, and that'll lead into the next unit on area. I know you guys already know a lot of things about circles. First of all, there is a symbol for circle. So if you can say circle C, that means the center of the circle is C. So it's okay to use that terminology and those symbols when you guys write a circle. You name it by its center point. Also, the definition of a circle is the set of all points in a plane equidistant from a given point. Okay, so if you think about that, if you have a given point, we'll call it A, and then you go out a given distance. We'll say maybe 3 inches. You go out 3 inches, and then you swing it all the way around the set of all points in that plane. That's 3 inches away from the given point. That's how a circle is defined. If I left out the words in a plane, if we just said the set of all points equidistant from a given point, that would be a sphere. And we'll talk about those when we get to the unit on area and volume. Okay, so a little background there about the definition. A lot of terms you already know, like the distance, that given distance at 3 inches would be the radius. If you double that or connect 2 points on the circle that contains the radius there, that would be your diameter. And just a little FYI, that is really important in this unit because the diameter splits the circle in half. So instead of dealing with all 360 degrees, which is how many degrees are in a circle, you'll only be dealing with 180. Okay, which is important when you're trying to solve for missing things. If you just connect 2 points on the circle, that's called a chord. So you could call this chord BC. So it would be chord BC. If it's a chord that contains the center point, that would be your diameter. Okay? Part of a circle is called an arc. So arc BC or arc CB would be this part of the circle. Okay? And in just a minute we'll talk about the difference between the arc measure and the arc length, which is one of the most important things that you need to take away from lesson 7-6. But a little more about arcs. If you go more than halfway around the circle, you put point D up here. If you go more than halfway around the circle, that's called a major arc. Okay, so you could call this arc BDC. And you put a little frowny face on the top when you're talking about arcs. I don't know if you can see that or not. But if you name it by 2 points on the circle, you go arc BC. That's a minor arc, and that is less than halfway around the circle. Okay, and you can see all that demonstrated there on pages 386 and 387 in your book. Also, just like we had in chapter 2, we had the segment addition postulate and angle addition postulate. There is an arc addition postulate, which is pretty much common sense. If you add 2 adjacent arcs, it can give you the bigger arc measure there. Okay. Also, forgot to mention that a half of a circle is called a semicircle. Okay, and sometimes you see that named either with 2 points or with 3 points on the circle. Doesn't matter. You see those interchanged sometimes. So be looking for that on a semicircle. Arc measure is always out of 360 degrees. Okay, and that's also based on your central angle. A central angle is an angle whose vertex is the center of the circle. Okay, so if we say that this is 60 degrees, that's the central angle. The arc's measure, this is also going to be 60 degrees out of your 360 degrees total. So your arc measure is the same as the central arc. Okay, that's an important concept. But sometimes students get confused arc measure and arc length. Okay, arc length would be like cutting the circle here and here, laying this arc out flat and measuring it. okay, which might be in inches or centimeters. Arc measure is out of 180 degrees. So let me call this AB. The measurement of arc AB, with a little m in front like we did with angles, would be 60 degrees. So arc measure is in degrees out of 360. Arc length is part of, well, the whole thing. If we were to cut that up, that would be your circumference. So you can make a little proportion whenever you need to, and that is that arc, let me write it out here for you. Arc measure is always out of 360, but arc length is part of your circumference. And if you remember, the formula for circumference is 2 pi r, or pi times the diameter. So most of the time when you're dealing with arc length, you've got to set up a proportion. Okay, so try not to get arc length confused with arc measure. Okay, and that covers almost everything in that lesson. This is once again lesson 7.6. If two arcs are congruent, they have the same measure. That makes sense from everything else we've done. Another definition is concentric circles, and that's like a bullseye, which would be two circles that have the same center point. Now, they would have different radii, but they would have the same center point. Those are called concentric circles. And I think that covers it for lesson 7.6.